Hello and welcome. Tonight, President Buhari attends National Summit on eliminating corruption in the public sector, bemoans fraudulent activities, says corruption hinders development. Controversial Islamic cleric Sheikh Ahmed Gumi slams military, alleges that some bad eggs are fueling banditry and terrorism in the country. Family of toddler who died due to alleged negligence of a medical officer demands justice over the death of their son in a Lagos hospital. And we continue our review of Nigeria at 62 tonight. Our focus is on the economy.
On business news tonight, the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited declares a 674 billion naira profit after tax for the financial year 2021.
On sports news tonight, Ogun State Governor Dapo Abiodun rewards World 100 meters hurdles champion Toby Amushon with 5 million naira, a house and sports ambassador of the state, following her amazing 2022 athletics performances.
From Abuja, the nation's capital, leadership of the House of Representatives meets with President Muhammadu Buhari over strike. ASU strike submits recommendations to the president to take final decision by Thursday.
And in international news from London, North Korea has fired a suspected missile over Japan in what appears to be a deliberate escalation to get the attention of Tokyo and Washington.
President Muhammadu Buhari has identified corruption and incessant strikes as factors undermining investment in the education sector. Speaking at the 4th National Summit on diminishing corruption in the public sector, the president explains that on-season strikes often implies that government is underfunding the system, but corruption from the basic to the tertiary level, the prolonged industrial actions are also complicit in undermining investment in the sector. Our State House correspondent Gloria Mozuke reports.
The present administration's investment and corruption efforts is central as President Muhammadu Buhari attends the 4th National Summit on diminishing corruption in the public sector at the State House. Top government officials, members of cabinet, the Inspector General of Police attend the event tagged Corruption and the Education Sector. President Buhari, who doubles as Africa's anti-corruption champion, pinpoints that corruption and incessant strikes top the list of persistent challenges that have eroded investments in the sector.
Incessant strikes, especially by unions in the tertiary education, often imply that the government is grossly underfunding education. But I must say that corruption in the education system, from basic level to tertiary level, has been undermining our investment in the sector. And those who go on prolonged strikes on flimsy reasons are no less complicit. Government will continue to fund education within realistically available revenue, but stakeholders, including the media, should equally advocate for transparency in the amount generated as internally generated revenue by educational institutions and how such funds are expended.
Already, major investigations and convictions have been secured and fraud cases within ministries, departments and agencies uncovered.
And so far this year, we've recovered 1.26 billion. Our findings thus far indicate that many prospective appointees are implicated for financial impropriety, corrupt practice, failure of code of conduct standards, and substance abuse.
The Education Minister established that activities in the education sector, which has become synonymous with corruption, has to be thoroughly investigated by the anti-corruption agencies.
We just have to be sincere with ourselves. Many times people will just stand condemning corruption, while the next moment they will engage in it. So we have to be serious and sincere with ourselves. Otherwise, this nation is doomed.
The keynote speaker, Professor Atahiru Jega, was not economical in his identification of the nation's fault lines and compromises in the education sector, including sexual harassment, bribery across the board, gross underfunding, and neglect.
Public officials occupying public offices in trust regrettably convert those for private gain, often with impunity. And with regards to the National Assembly, every vice chancellor has to come to defend his or her budget, and in the process, a lot of deals are made. Either your own requirements for the budget are not approved until you do deals, or if you refuse to do deals, that is cut, or if you agree, then the budget is also padded up.
The president also recognized and congratulated Superintendent Daniel Ishe Ama, the sole winner of the 2022 Public Service Integrity Awards. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umizuke, Channels Television News.
We'll be having more reports on education later in the bulletin. To other stories now, 7 senior police officers have been dismissed by the Police Service Commission over gross misconduct, while 10 others, including an assistant commissioner of police, were demoted in rank. The dismissed officers include 1 chief superintendent of police, a superintendent of police, and 5 assistant superintendents, and another superintendent of police, SP, was also retired in public interest. The decisions were taken at the ongoing 15th plenary meeting of the Commission, presided over by Justice Clara Bata Ogumi, retired, which considered all the 47 pending disciplinary matters before the Commission and also treated some appeals from the dismissed police officers. Still on security, when some people who are constitutionally saddled with the responsibility of protecting lives and property not only fail in their duties but become accomplices to crime, then there's a big problem. This is why an Islamic cleric, Sheikh Ahmed Gumi, is calling on the military to remove the bad eggs from among them, as he alleges that some men within are fueling banditry and terrorism in the north. Sheikh Gumi is suggesting that the military must flush out all corrupt officers in the system if the war against insecurity must be won. He was speaking at a security summit organized by the Kaduna State government.
We have to flush security forces from bad elements. If you don't do that, you are wasting your time because they connive with the criminals. Just recently, we lost a scholar. What happened? A good Samaritan, he saw soldiers guarding the road. He took 2 as a lift. He doesn't know they are, even though they are in the army, they are armed robbers. This is the one we have seen. We have to flush the security from bad elements. Without doing that, we are just taking Panadol, treating malaria or typhoid fever.
Meanwhile, the Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Rabo, is promising Nigeria that the armed forces would bequeath a peaceful Nigeria at the end of this administration, as directed by the president. He was speaking today at the groundbreaking ceremony of a post-traumatic stress disorder center by the Defense and Police Officers' Wives Association in Abuja. At the event, the wife of the president, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, kicked against moves to raise funds for the center, saying it is the responsibility of the federal government and the president to execute. Our correspondent, Emperor Simon, has more.
Traumatized and left with lifetime scars, these are soldiers injured on the battlefront in northeast Nigeria. At least more than 100 soldiers have been killed and scores of others wounded in various operations across the country in this year alone. And against this backdrop, the Defense and Police Wives Association, DEPOA, is embarking on the construction of a post-traumatic stress disease PTSD center in Abuja that will cater for their mental health needs. The groundbreaking ceremony is being attended by the wife of the president, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, former president of Malawi, Mrs. Joyce Banda, Vice President of Liberia, Mrs. Joel Howard Taylor, and the immediate past chair of the UN National Committee, Baroness Sandy Verma. On the state of insecurity, the Chief of Defense Staff restates the commitment of the military to ensure that peace is restored in line with the directive of President Muhammadu Buhari.
I'd like to use this opportunity to pledge the unalloyed loyalty of members of the armed forces, indeed to Mr. President and Commander-in-Chief, letting him know that his avowed desire to bequeath a Nigeria that is safe to all Nigerians at the end of his tenure, come 2023, that we will stand ready to be able to carry out all the directives that he has given and for him to achieve that aim.
The PTSD facility will serve as a rehabilitation center for soldiers after their return from military operations.
When completed, the center will help evaluate, counsel, and provide adequate support to personnel and, by extension, their families before reintegration from conflict zones.
The initial plan for the execution of the project was to do a fundraising. However, the wife of the president, Mrs. Aisha Buhari, objects to the idea.
Fundraising is not a solution. The solution is the federal government that sent them to fight that sent them to the war front to take responsibility in taking care of their families and also taking care of their mental health after returning from the war front.
She also speaks about her experience as the wife of a former military head of state, promising that the PTSD center will be completed before the end of her husband's administration.
1 year after he came out from detention, we were married. I clocked 19 years as his wife in his house, legitimately. So I suffered the consequences of the PTSD, because having gone through all this at the age of 19 to handle somebody who is a former president of Nigeria and the commander-in-chief of the Nigerian Armed Forces, to tell the person that he's wrong, to tell him that he's wrong is the first mistake that you are doing.
She then proceeds to perform the groundbreaking ceremony in hopes that this will serve as a morale booster to men of the Nigerian Armed Forces. Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
To legal matters now, a federal government agency, the Advertising Regulatory Council of Nigeria, ARCON, today instituted a suit against Meta Platforms Incorporated, owners of Facebook, Instagram and WhatsApp platforms, and its agent, 3 Resources Limited, at the Federal High Court, Abuja. ARCON is seeking 30 billion naira for the violation of the advertising laws and for loss of revenue as a result of Meta Incorporated's continued exposure of unapproved adverts on its platforms. ARCON also seeks, among others, the declaration that the continued publication and exposure of various advertisements directed at the Nigerian market through Facebook and Instagram platforms by Meta Incorporated without ensuring same is vetted and approved before exposure is illegal, unlawful, and a violation of the excellent advertising laws in Nigeria. The Advertising Council states that Meta Platforms Incorporated's continued exposure of unvetted adverts has also led to loss of revenue to the federal government. Meanwhile, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Mr. Mike Ezekome, and Counsel to Leader of the Proscribed Indigenous People of Biafra, is asking the United Nations to prevail on the Nigerian government to ensure the immediate and unconditional release of his client. He's making the appeal on the ruling of the United Nations Working Group on Arbitrary Detention, which was adopted on the 4th of April 2022 at the 93rd session of the United Nations, which had advised the federal government to release his client unconditionally. Mr. Ezekome says the working group is concerned about the treatment of Nnamdi Kanu, calling it unfair, unjust, and a violation of the UN rules. He's urging President Buhari to attend promptly to the petition by ordering the immediate and unconditional release of his client. In the meantime, the Federal High Court sitting in Umuahia has adjourned till the 27th of October, ruling on the matter bordering on the fundamental human rights of the IPOB leader, Nnamdi Kanu. The ruling, which was earlier scheduled for today, was shifted owing to submission by the counsels to both parties. Justice Evelyn Ayadike said the 2 weeks extension will enable her consider the written submissions before the ruling. In part two, after the break, our focus tonight will be on the economy as Nigeria turns 62. Our guest is Mr. Marcel Keke, former Chief Economic Advisor to Zenith Bank. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 live on Channels Television. A reminder of our top stories. The President attends National Summit on eliminating corruption in the public sector, bemoans fraudulent activities, says corruption hinders development. Controversial Islamic cleric Sheikh Ahmed Gumi slams military, alleges that some bad eggs are fueling banditry and terrorism in the country. Family of toddler who died due to alleged negligence of medical officer demands justice over death of their son in a Lagos hospital. And North Korea fires suspected missile over Japan in what appears to be a deliberate escalation to get Tokyo and Washington's attention. It's a demand for justice in Lagos as distraught family members of a toddler who died while receiving treatment at the Etiosa Maternal and Childcare Center, Lekki Aja, are demanding full accountability. The parents claim their child, David Nwogu, had fully recovered from the infection earlier diagnosed before the injections which caused his death were administered. The victim's parents spoke to Channels Television.
Help me, please. Help me. Human rights lawyers, help me. Help me.
A viral video of a grieving father showing his displeasure over the circumstance that led to the death of his 3-year-old baby, David Nwogu, while on admission at the emergency ward of the Etiosa Maternal and Childcare Center, Lekki Aja. Mr. Nwogu is demanding for justice as he alleges that the nurse on duty at the time of the incident is responsible for David's death and would want an in-depth investigation into the incident.
So after discussing with the doctor, later the nurse now came to administer that drug. Upon administering that drug for the first dosage, my son shouted, "Daddy, my tummy," and he vomited. Early in the morning, the same nurse came that she wanted to administer that same drug. I told her, I thought the doctor said it's just 1.5 grams that we're administering him. Did not say no, that I need to buy additional 1 more bottle. The injection, she took it in about 3-4 syringes. She put the first one, immediately she just pressed. Took the second one, pressed. Took the third one, pressed. Immediately my son shouted, "Daddy, my heart." That my heart that my son shouted, and for him to stand his eye turning was it.
David's mother is still in shock as she grieves over the loss of her only son.
If my son were to be ill, seriously ill, I won't bother. But he was just so energetic. I know there is nothing they can do that can fill in that gap. But I want justice for my only son. I know there is nothing they can do that can fill in that gap. But I want justice for my only son.
The case is currently being handled by the police state CIID Panti for discreet investigation, and the couple say they are a middle-class family but hopeful on having a private medical practitioner coming to their aid for the autopsy procedure.
They say they are investigating the matter. But if proper investigation is not carried out and the proper actions are not taken to stop such incident from happening, nobody knows whose child will be victim.
In his condolence to the Nwogu family, Professor Akin Abayomi says an independent investigation has been launched into the allegation and the circumstances surrounding the unfortunate incident, while the management of the facility have also officially reported the incident to the ministry. For now, the body of the 3-year-old is in mortuary. No suspect has been arrested over the incident. All the police is drumming for is to carry out an autopsy. Family would want government to have a thorough investigation on service delivery at the Etiosa Maternal and Childcare Facility.
Heartbreaking story. Let's go to other stories now. In 62 years, the Nigerian economy has witnessed booms and bursts from the era of agricultural to crude oil dependence. This report by our business correspondent, Laddie Williams, highlights the issues and possible solutions to the economic challenges.
Over the past 62 years, the Nigerian economy has witnessed major changes from an agriculture-based to a largely services and oil and gas-driven economy. The services sector has grown significantly since independence and now contributes over 57% of Nigeria's GDP. While the economy had experienced some positive growth trend over the past 6 decades, especially in the oil boom era, how has it fared compared to countries such as Singapore, China, and others considered as Nigeria's peers in the 60s?
China, for example, was very clear. China had a GDP size of $59 billion. We had $4 billion. The entire country had $4 billion. That was the GDP of Nigeria in 1960. Malaysia had $1.92 billion. Singapore had less than $1 billion. Go forward 62 years. Singapore, the income per head in Nigeria has gone from $93 to $2,225. China has gone from the Chinese income per capita was $90, $90 for one person a year. It's now $10,000.
Unlike its peers, Nigeria has been experiencing double-digit inflation since 2016, fueled partly by a weakening naira and structural issues. Inflation has maintained an upward trajectory in recent times, hitting 20.52% in August 2022. Analysts say the central bank's interventions may also be stoking inflation.
The CBN had injected over 9 trillion naira into the economy, in addition to offering 2-year moratorium for 10-year long-term loan facilities. The committee believed that these interventions have significantly helped to engender growth. However, in light of the persistent pressures on inflation, the committee encouraged the bank to maintain a close watch on the inflationary implications of these interventions.
Following global trends, the Monetary Policy Committee of the Central Bank has hiked rates in 3 consecutive meetings to curb inflation. The meeting in September hiked MPR by 150 basis points and CRR to a minimum of 32.5%. While this hawkish stance has been widely criticized, the president believes it's in line with the present economic needs.
We are confronting current economic challenges such as debt burden, growing inflation, living standards, and increasing unemployment accentuated by our growing youthful population. These problems are globally induced, and we would continue to ensure that their negative effects are addressed in our policies.
Inflation is not the only macro headwind. The country's debt is also surging, currently exceeding 42 trillion naira and servicing more than revenue. Exchange rate volatility is worsened with an increasing import bill. Some economists are not surprised that economic growth is stunted.
Central Bank of Nigeria shared this year that we spent $40 billion to import both education and health about $28 billion is what we spent on importing education. Meanwhile, average of $1 billion per annum is what we have spent to bring in health, that is to import health. These are things that in 1960, there was hope. We saw University Teaching Hospital in Ibadan, and we saw some things that leaders of those days were trying to put in place so that we will not continue to deplete our foreign exchange.
All hope is not lost, according to economist Bismarck Ruwane, but critical steps need to be taken.
You have to reschedule and restructure your debt profile, because once you push out the debt, principal and interest payments over a longer period and refinance them with more expensive, you will have some breathing room to invest in productive and increase total factor productivity and labor productivity.
The Buhari-led administration comes to an end in a few months, and it remains to be seen how the next president will tackle the economic challenges. Ladi Williams reporting for Channels Television News.
Mr. Marcel Okeke, an economist, joins me now for more on the news at 10. Welcome.
Thank you.
What's the state, what state is the nation's economy now? If you were to describe it in one word, what would you call it?
It's not so good. The state of the economy is not so good.
That's more than a word. But then let's talk about what you said at One Fora. You said that only a knowledgeable leader can solve the economic problem and pull the nation back. You said elect leaders who are knowledgeable about economic issues. What kind of knowledge is amiss, has been amiss?
When you say the knowledge that is needed for the leader that will pull the Nigeria economy back, to progress, not necessarily knowledge of economy. It has to be somebody who understands the politics of this country, that will demonstrate what is called the political will to implement, some of the policies of his government. Okay, somebody who also understands, has knowledge of both local and international politics and international relations, because Nigeria is not an island unto itself. We relate with the rest of the world. And so a proper understanding of international relations, will go a long way in determining what we even do locally here, so that Nigeria will really function as a giant of not only Africa, but a voice to reckon with in the whole world.
Have we gotten anything right in the past 6 decades?
Of course, we've gotten a few things right, and that is why we still have this country called Nigeria today. We've gotten a few things right.
So in terms of our economy?
Yes. If we've been getting it all wrong, we won't have anything called economy now. For instance, when we did banking consolidation, okay, and you have Nigerian banks that are big and strong and reliable, we started playing, in the global space. Not mushroom banks all over the place. So we got that right. And that is why you have the financial services sector in Nigeria today strong in spite of, the vicissitudes or, or whatever is happening to the rest of the world. Nigerian banks are still strong and doing well.
What do we do in the immediate, considering high inflation rates, the debts, higher commodity prices? There is the problem of oil theft. There's naira, value. There's also insecurity.
There is no short-term way out of the challenges we are facing now. There's no short-term way out. You can have mid-term and long-term, measures that can take us out of where we are now. You have mentioned insecurity. Of course, that has to be handled as a foundation for the rest of whatever could be done, okay? Then before you start talking about effective diversification of the Nigerian economy, and I mean underline the word effective. It has to be effective because you have to have sectors that are earning foreign exchange substantially, not only to support oil, which appears to be the only product, but also to even outpace it in terms of bringing in a foreign exchange. Until you have that situation, the economy is not effectively diversified. And so we remain a monoproduct economy, meaning that whatever happens to oil, to a large extent, determine the state and fate of the economy. And with all its problems, because we neither determine the volume to export, nor the price to receive per barrel of oil. And so everything depends on what happens outside.
So essentially long-term, there are no short-term measures.
Well, you can do certain things short-term, But if you continue to do them consistently, it could lead to the long term. Like if you put a policy in place to talk about diversification, I want to encourage export. You know, you now have to put the facilities or structure or infrastructure in place to support, production, manufacturing. You understand? So this takes time to put in place. And when people are manufacturing, don't go to change policies midway that will now undermine whatever they are doing. You understand? That's why we say it's long term. So when people are enjoying the state of the infrastructure and producing maybe at a relatively low cost, you understand? Because they have to play in the global economy to compete with other producers of such product. You understand? So the situation has to be sustained for them to mature in doing what they are doing and compete with the rest of the world. And our product will be competitive out there. So over time, you now see that Nigeria becomes a productive economy rather than being a consumption one all the time.
We have the teeming youth unemployment, there's underemployment. What do you see us doing?
Pardon?
What do you see us doing to solve that problem?
It goes with what we are saying. It's when you have this long-term plan in place that encourage people to manufacture and produce. Manufacturing and production, we mean many hands we brought to, work. And when many people are being taken out of, unemployment, you understand? That means the economy is becoming buoyant.
So do you see us, applying this? Do we have policies that integrate all of this?
Of course, that is why the government or the Nigeria should have what is called economic development plan, of which you have to make it either 5 years or 10 years. Do you understand? And not where we are now, and we are hearing that the president has set up an economic management team that he wants to become the chairman and all that, and the government will be living in a matter of a few months. So economies are not run that way. It's too short term, to make any impact.
Because I know in the past we've had the economic growth recovery plan. We've had them for many years, but
even those ones are short term, because the economic recovery and growth plan you're talking about was just for 3 years. You understand? And we have what is called gestation period. So by the time you finish even preparing so-called plan, which is for 3 years, 1 year has gone, and effectively you only have 1 or 2 years to implement it, and it just goes away. Okay? And when that plan you mentioned elapsed, there's had a gap of another 1 year before they could produce another one. You understand? So this is a problem. So that's why it has to be long-term enough to accommodate the kind of position I am putting together.
We'd like to appreciate your time on the News at 10. Mr. Marcel Okeke is an economist, former chief economist at Zenith Bank. Thanks once again.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Millicent. Having me.
Thank you. Let's head over to Abuja, where Gloria Mozeke is standing by with more. Hi, Gloria. Looking great in yellow.
Thank you, Millicent. Good to see you, as always. Well, we'll begin with more stories on industrial action. Now worried by the lingering Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU strike, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Mr. Femi Gbajabiamila, led the leadership of the House to meet President Muhammadu Buhari at the Aso Rock Presidential Villa in Abuja, the nation's capital. Now, during the meeting, Mr. Gbajabiamila presented some recommendations to the President as part of the lawmakers' contributions to ending the industrial rift between the aggrieved university lecturers and the federal government. Now, while addressing State House correspondents after the meeting, the Speaker says the lawmakers are hopeful because the President had granted a good listening ear and accepted the details of the report.
We came here for one reason and one reason only, to, after a series of engagements with ASU and with people on the executive side, we've been able to come to some kind of decision on our part and recommendations to be made to the Mr. President for his approval. And that's why we're here, because as you know, what's on the front burner today, even beyond the politics, is our universities, our lecturers, and our children who are out of school. And the House of Representatives decided to step in at that point 4 weeks ago. We've had a series of meetings that lasted hours. And Mr. President, as usual, had a very good listening ear, and he took the report report of the House. He accepted it. We discussed it at length, the details of the report, and he wanted to go through them himself, and he will get back to us. We have another meeting on Thursday between our good selves and Mr. President for his final decision. We're absolutely very hopeful. We had a good engagement. Very positive response. He asked us a couple of questions in some gray areas, which we clarified, and he accepted the report, and he wanted a couple of days to go through it.
Well, the federal government has presented certificates of registration to 2 labor unions in the university system. The unions are the National Association of Medical and Dental Academics, NAMDA, and the Congress of Nigerian University Academics, CONUA. The Minister of Labour and Productivity, Mr. Chris Ngige, explains that the 2 bodies will exist alongside the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU. He further states that the 2 associations will now enjoy the rights and privileges accorded to other academic institutions in the tertiary education system.
This hall is popular for hosting several labor negotiations with the federal government. And this time, it's another kind of conversation. One of the unions that have had several meetings with the government in this hall is the Academic Staff Union of Universities. And though they are not represented here, the meeting is one that should interest the union. The federal government is recognizing 2 labor unions in the nation's university system, and one of them is the Breakaway Group from ASU.
In the exercise of the power conferred on me as Honorable Minister of Labour and Employment, do hereby approve the registration of 1. Congress of Nigerian University Academics, CONUA. 2. Nigerian Association of Medical and Dental Lecturers in Academics, NAMDA.
The minister then reads the Rights Act to the newly established unions before presenting the certificates to their representatives. He hints that more of such unions will be recognized.
Any discussion where ASU is invited, they should also be invited. There is no more one voice speaking now for academics in the universities. For today, there are 3 voices. And more will follow. More will follow. More are coming. More are coming. More are coming.
The essence of this recognition is well received by the associations.
Prior to today, the peculiarity of the medical and dental training was increasingly emasculated, triggered by bodies that capitalize on the lack of a voice for medical and dental practitioners in academics, particularly in the university system.
The hurdles we have faced to get here since 2018, when we submitted our application for registration, have been seemingly insurmountable. The registration is therefore the validation of the power of the human will.
The federal government insists that the no work, no pay policy for members of ASU is still in force, as it urges them to return to their classrooms as ordered by the National Industrial Court.
In a swift reaction, the Academic Staff Union of Universities, ASU, has said the registration of 2 new trade unions by the federal government for academic staff in the university system is inconsequential and does not pose any threat to its existence. The national president of ASU, Professor Emmanuel Osodeke, insists the registration of the 2 new unions does not in any way affect members of ASU, as they remain disciplined and focused as a union, and government can register as many unions as they like. Professor Osodeke says the struggle is for a better educational system in the country, and if the system is good, everyone will benefit from improved funding and the provision of better facilities in the country's institutions. As campaigns gather speed across the country, a solidarity rally to drum up support for the presidential candidate of the APC, Chief Bola Tinubu, held today in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, amidst fanfare. The rally, which took off at the APC office, Okeado, Ibadan, proceeded to many parts of town, creating traffic congestion in affected places. The governorship candidate of the APC in Oyo State, while addressing journalists, said the rally is to show that Oyo State is for the APC, as evident in the rally.
Hundreds of APC supporters take to major streets in Ibadan, Oyo State, to prove one thing, which is that the ancient city of Ibadan supports the APC presidential candidate, Bola Tinubu. From the APC office at Okeado, the procession moved to Molete, to Bere, from Oje to Agodi Gate, from where the rally continues to Mokola, Dugbe, Okebola, and terminated at Okeado APC office. The supporters wearing branded Tinubu Shetima t-shirts sing solidarity songs as they move from place to place. Earlier, before the rally, the APC governorship candidate in Oyo State, Senator Teslim Folarin, told journalists that the rally is to create awareness and show how citizens in the state feel about the presidential flag bearer.
People of Oyo State came to us and said, look, we want to show our support for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. You know, we want to set our mark. We want to make it clear that Oyo State is for Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Oyo State is for APC. And to people of Oyo State, that Asiwaju is the hope of Nigeria. Simple as that. Asiwaju represents the change that we've all been craving for. And, you know,
the well-attended rally is the second in the series of rallies for the APC candidates at federal and state levels in Oyo State.
The People's Democratic Party leadership is not leaving anything to chance as members of the Board of Trustees meet with Governor Nyesom Wike in Port Harcourt with a resolve to unify the PDP. At the end of the meeting, the chairman of the BOT and former Senate President Adolphus Wabara acknowledges that making peace is sometimes very difficult, but he is optimistic that the party will achieve unity soonest. For Governor Wike, the peace move and the visit of the leadership to Port Harcourt is a signal that the internal issues in the party would be resolved.
It's always easy to destroy, but to make peace, it takes some time. But I think we are it. We are better informed. We've gotten some information. Every coin has two sides. So we have been briefed by His Excellency, and so we will go back to Abuja. We'll be going back to Abuja to really digest all that we gathered from His Excellency. And it was very frank talks. But one good thing is that this family still remains one. We are still under that umbrella called PDP, and by the special grace of God, we will end up very victorious, and we will end up at the Villa in 2023.
What's important for you to have unity, even if it takes you longer days. Yeah. What is important is that the House is united for the war that's coming in front. So the issue of whether they achieve peace today or not is immaterial. What's material? At the end of the day, the PDP is united. I think that is the message he's conveying. And we have said repeatedly that we are not leaving the party.
We have said so. But that does not mean that there are no internal issues that ought to be sorted out. I think what they are here for is to see how they can sort out some internal issues. I think that point has been made.
Well, still on party politics, the presidential flag bearer of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, is unhappy with Nigerian security agencies, whom he accuses of attacking and arresting his supporters during the Obedient rally. Mr. Obi was reacting to a recent report of attack on Obi flag boys in Oshodi area of Lagos State, allegedly by supporters of the ruling party and security agencies. Obi, in a series of tweets on his Twitter page on Tuesday, said that elections cannot be described as free and fair when certain groups employ the tools of intimidation to silence the opposition during campaigns and at polls. Obi urged the federal and state governments to call security operatives committing such acts to order and remind them on the need to respect civil liberties of his supporters to ensure free, fair, credible, and transparent elections in 2023. Well, that's it from the nation's capital. It's back to you, Millicent.
Thanks, Gloria. Now to some company news. Nigeria's digital and telecommunications service provider Globacom has unveiled its new ambassador, world record holder Toby Amusan. Now, at the unveiling event in Lagos, the telecom giant says the choice of the world champion as brand ambassador is in appreciation of her qualities and determination to succeed. The champ promised continued leadership and mentorship to justify her appointment.
The face of the world champion, Toby Amusan, who not only stunned the world, but also roused it to his feet, now becoming the bride and the beloved of all. And that's a person Globacom has chosen to identify with as its new ambassador.
Unlimited dream.
Globacom considers the world's fastest woman in the 100 meters hurdles as reflective of the Nigerian spirit of resilience and determination. Hence our choice to help motivate and inspire other African youth to greatness.
At Globacom, we are very proud of what Toby Amusan has achieved in her athletic career. She's an embodiment of the Nigerian spirit of resilience, hard work, and enterprise, which enable her to excel irrespective of the enormity of the challenges she encountered in her quest for success. As a Glo ambassador, Toby Amusan will represent the company and project the image of the brand across the world. She will be a constant reminder to all the youth across the African continent that hard work pays and that there is no limit to their ambitions.
Toby signs a contract to become Glo's first female ambassador, a brand she says she's always admired.
I am happy to join the long list of stars and sports like people like Anthony Joshua, Michael Obi, Emmanuel Menike Osage, and many more. As a Glo ambassador, I hope to mentor and inspire younger people to achieve their goals. I am proud to be associated with Glo and also be its brand ambassador.
Both partners express optimism this alliance will fulfill its purpose.
It's a great privilege, being the first female signee. So I'm just excited to be a part of this great establishment, and I'm looking forward to work with the company.
The message we try to put out there is the fact that hard work pays. When you work hard at what you want to achieve, when you dream and you dream big, it is possible only if you work very hard. Toby is a budding example, starting from the street of Ijebu-Ode.
The contract takes immediate effect, and Globacom promises not to waver in its resolve to invest in the African youth, particularly in sports.
Business News is next. Here's Anne Nwaldo.
Thank you, Millicent. Hello and welcome to Business News. The Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited has declared a profit after tax of 674 billion naira for the financial year 2021. Addressing a news conference in Abuja, the Group Chief Executive Officer of NNPC Limited, Mr. Mele Kyari, announced the approval of the 2021 audited financial statements by the board of the oil company. Mr. Kyari adds that the company has recorded a reduction in daily production of crude oil from over 2.4 million in 2020 to about 1.2 million in 2022. He blames vandalism and the impact of COVID-19 pandemic for the fall in crude oil production. And we head to the equities market. It kicked off the last quarter of 2022 in negative territory. Laddie Williams has more.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. Well, the first trading day in the fourth quarter ended in negative, with the NGX losing to 49,000 points and the All-Share Index there down 0.29%. We see a massive sell-off in the market today, and the bear is growling really loud at this point. Well, the deal may have ended in the green there, talking about the activity chart, but we're seeing mostly red across the counters there, with volume there, 173 million units of stocks traded, valued at 2.39 billion naira. So we're seeing a lot of sell pressure reflected there, but deals there, we see 4,926, almost 5,000 deals. Let's move over to the sectoral performance now. We see banking there, massive drop there in the banking counter, down 2.58%. We saw sell-offs with banking stocks there like Zenith Bank, GTCO, and UBA, losing about 15 kobo, 70 kobo, and 25 kobo, respectively. Quite a bloody day there, with consumer goods not left out, down 0.41%. Oil and gas down 0.34%. So we're seeing major sell-offs now. The first trading day for the month of October, even though other equities markets globally are looking quite good at this time, the NGX is looking quite bloody starting this month. Well, that's the Stock Market Report. I'm Laddie Williams. It's back to you.
And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawodo. Millicent will be back with the rest of the news at 10.
Banking.
Thanks, Anne. Now to some international news and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. North Korea has fired a suspected missile over Japan in what appears to be a deliberate escalation to get the attention of Tokyo and Washington. Speaking in the Japanese capital, Prime Minister Fumio Kishida said North Korea has fired a ballistic missile. It flew over our country and we believe it fell in the Pacific Ocean. It's another barbaric action again after the repeated ballistic missile launches, and we strongly condemn this. The ballistic missile travelled around 4,500 kilometres before falling into the Pacific Ocean, far enough to hit the US island of Guam if it took another trajectory. It is the first North Korean missile launch over Japan since 2017. The launch saw Japan issue a rare alert to some citizens to take cover, although here citizens remained calm and seemed to ignore the warnings. Here, a J-alert missile warning on a train that was temporarily halted due to the danger. The launch comes as Japan, the US and South Korea have been working together to strengthen their defences in response to the growing threat posed by the North. Ukrainian troops have retaken more territory in regions illegally annexed by Russia, with Kyiv's forces advancing near the southern city of Kherson and consolidating gains in the east. Here, a Ukrainian soldier removing a Russian flag and replacing it with the Ukrainian one in an area around Kherson. Russian-installed officials confirmed the advance but said Moscow's forces were digging in. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said there are new liberated settlements in several regions. Speaking during his nightly address, President Zelensky said fierce fighting continues in many areas, but he did not give details. The progress of Ukraine's counterattacks have been closely guarded, and reporters have largely been kept away from the front lines. Iran's supreme leader has blamed the United States and Israel for the protests sweeping the country following the death of a woman whilst in police custody. In his first public comments on the unrest, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei said riots had been engineered by Iran's arch-enemies and their allies. The protests are the biggest challenge to his rule for a decade, and he urged security forces to be ready for more. Here, video released purportedly showing people fleeing amid clashes between Iranian security forces and students at a prominent university in Tehran. The US said it was appalled by the violent response to the protests. President Joe Biden said he was gravely concerned about reports of the intensifying violent crackdown on peaceful protesters. The United Nations Secretary General has said the world cannot wait when it comes to cutting CO2 emissions.
While climate chaos gallops ahead, climate action has stalled.
Antonio Guterres said we are in a life and death struggle as he spoke ahead of the UN's COP27 climate summit in November in Egypt. Dozens of ministers and senior delegates are meeting in the Democratic Republic of Congo's capital. The high-level speakers at the climate talks in Kinshasa particularly called out rich nations for failing to honour a $100 billion per year funding pledge to developing countries, warning that fair finance was needed to avert the worst of the climate crisis. The European Parliament has approved new rules that will introduce in the European Union a single charging port for mobile phones, tablets and cameras by 2024, a world first that is expected to affect iPhone maker Apple more than its rivals. The vote confirms an earlier agreement among EU institutions and will make USB-C connectors used by Android-based devices the EU standard, forcing Apple to change its charging port for iPhones and other devices. And finally, Orthodox Jews have performed rituals to cleanse themselves from sin ahead of Yom Kippur, or Day of Atonement, which began at sundown. In Jerusalem's ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, people took part in the custom called Kapparot by waving a live chicken over their head. The act is thought to purge the believer of their sins by symbolically passing them on to the animal. In the old city of Jerusalem, thousands of people took part in Selichot prayers at the Western Wall, asking God to forgive them for past sins. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel Studios in Lagos.
Thank you, Simon, and welcome to Sports News. Now, Ogun State Governor Dapo Abiodun has honored women's 100-meter world hurdles champion Tobi Amusan as a sports ambassador for the emancipation of women and the girl child in the state. The governor earlier today played host to the Commonwealth gold medalist and her team in his office in Abeokuta, the Ogun State capital. The governor also announced a cash of 5 million naira and a home in Ijebu-Ode to the world champion. That's a wrap on Sports News. Is back to Millicent with the wrap of the news at 10.
Thank you, Victor. And the main news again. Today, President Buhari attended the National Summit on Eliminating Corruption in the Public Sector, bemoaned fraudulent activities, said corruption hinders development. That's your news at 10 tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Millicent Walker. Have a good night. Stay safe.